Good day, students. Welcome to our presentation for research project phase 1, that is B.Ed Rp22. Speaking to you, I'm your tutor, Etuna Simon Ngifikwa. You can contact me on 085 266 3698, and you can also feel free to drop me an email at etunangifikwa@gmail.com, etunangifikwa@gmail.com, and the best time to contact me is between 8:30 and 4:30. Starting with our presentation, we are going to focus on the research proposal. It is very important at this stage that you understand how to draft your research proposal and where to begin. So I will share some of the layout for this presentation. That is the reflective thinking questions that you may understand, and it will also help you as you develop your research topic, and then also as you start preparing your research proposal. And it is also some important information that I will talk about in this presentation, and will also look at the research proposal outline that is of utmost importance in this presentation, and also to give you some important tips because you will need it at this stage. Remember, this is the phase 1 of your research project. These are some of the reflective thinking questions that you can think about. Like, for example, what do I want to study? It is very important to understand what it is that you want to research on. Where is your focus in terms of your project? Where do you want to focus? What is it that you would want to find out? Why is the topic important, for example? Remember, at this stage, you need to develop a topic. You actually need to send me a draft of your topic via email for approval. So we will then look at your topic, give you comments where possible, or make few adjustments, and also just to give you more guidance as you develop your research topic. How is it significant within the subject areas covered in my course? So it is always important to understand the significance of the study that you are envisioning to propose. You see, what problems will it help solve? It is very important to identify problems already, so that you know, if I have to carry on with this project, I'm anticipating to solve this kind of problems. How does it build upon and hopefully go beyond research already conducted on the topic? So remember, there are previous studies that were done in that particular subject. So what exactly should I plan to do, and can I get it done in the available time? Remember, you are given a time frame to submit your proposal, right? Because before you can continue with your project, that is now to actually go out there in the field, do research observation or classroom observation, for example, interview participants, you need to make sure that your proposal is approved. So before you can get it approved, you then need to draft it and send it through. So we will talk about that proposal in this presentation. So always think about those questions as you are, especially when you are developing your topic. I always tell students not to panic if you cannot get it right. Just send us a concept note, particularly focusing on what it is that you would like to do. How are you going to do it? So just have it, a 1 page is sufficient. Even if it's just a paragraph, then we can have an idea on how to guide you and advise you further in your journey towards your research project. Okay, continuing, we are going to look at some of the important information that you should consider. You need to prepare a research proposal in the area of your expertise. Remember, the area that you are comfortable with, that you are knowledgeable about. You need to choose any topic of your choice in your area of interest as well, the one where you have interest in. Don't take something that you are not interested in, because in the end, you will end up doing something that you don't like. So it is very important to actually propose an idea of what it is that you have an interest in, because you will enjoy doing that project. You need to ensure that your proposal is 12 pages long, including table of contents and references. And talking about table of contents, I particularly want to emphasize that it is very important not to type the table of content, but to generate it with the Microsoft Word document. It is very easy to do that. The first thing that you need to do is you are typing your information for your research proposal. You should actually format headings accordingly. If you see in Microsoft Word, on top there where the headings are, there is always instructions. You will see the headings are labeled clearly with ABC letters. Then you know that this is the main heading, the subheadings, so forth. So you should format them accordingly. Then later on it will make your work easier, such that you will then only need to generate the table of content just to go through the Microsoft Word. If you go to File, then you'll be able to generate the table of content in Insert. So you then generate it automatically. Normally I advise students to opt for the second option. So make sure that your proposal is typed and you are using Times New Roman, that is the font, with font size 12 and line spacing 1.5. That is very important. Also, make use of APA format for both in-text citations and reference list. So remember that at IOL we have adopted the APA referencing style. So no other referencing style, only APA. It is very important to adhere to that, and please read further on APA referencing style so that you know how do I then reference in-text citation, how do I then reference at the end, once I have used the resources, after I credit the resources, how do I then compile a reference list? So making use of the APA referencing style. Okay, in terms of the research proposal, we are going to have a look at the layout thereof. So it will be presented in 3 sections. You are expected to actually have 3 sections of your research proposal. Section 1 is basically focusing on introduction, where you would need to introduce your proposal. And then section 2 is basically focusing on literature review. And then section 3, that is methodology. And then please remember, you need to have references, and everything should be included in the 12 pages. So that is the title page, the section 1, information about introduction, information about section 2, that is literature review, all the subsections inclusive in all those sections to make up the 12 pages, including the reference list. So very important to pay attention to that. So let us start with section 1. Particularly, there's a need for you to understand background of the study. You need to give a brief background. It's always very important to justify your study. So we are going to look at background of the study, statement of the problem here, questions and or objectives of the study, rationale or significance of the study, limitation of the study, delimitation of the study, as well as definitions of terms. So particularly, I want you to pay attention to, if a heading has 2 subheadings, like to say, for example, questions or objectives of the study, rationale or significance of the study, you are actually expected to choose either. You should either do one and not both. You cannot address both questions and objective in your proposal. Just focus on one. If you are opting for objective, then your heading should read as objectives of the study. If you are focusing on questions, then your heading should read as questions of the study. The same applies to rationale or significance of the study. So if your heading is then, if you opt to focus because they are addressing the same thing, although they may be presented differently, so then you can opt for rationale, then your heading should read as such. If you are opting for significance of the study, the same applies to that. Okay, let us start with background of the study. For the purpose of the background of the study, you are expected to provide the necessary background or context of your research problem. Your readers need to understand where is your study coming from, why that study. You are actually justifying why you are doing that particular study. Just to mention, before we continue, I have noticed that students normally forget about the title page. In fact, before I speak about the background, let us quickly focus on the title page. The proposal should also have a title page that comprises of the student's information, the information of the institution. It should actually start with the heading, the topic of your proposal of your study. So if your title reads as Teachers' Use of ICT in the Teaching of Life Science in their Classroom, that is now the title. It should be on top, and then you can then have your name and all the information that is required at the title page. So let us continue with the background of the study. As I indicated earlier, that there is a need to provide the necessary background or context of your research problem, and you should actually provide a brief but appropriate historical backdrop. Your readers actually need to understand where is this study coming from. Has it been done before in Namibia particularly? Has it been done, that is now locally we are referring to? Has it been done regionally? Has it been done globally? So you need to give us a backdrop so that we understand where is this study coming from, because you are not reinventing the wheel. There is also a need to provide the contemporary context in which your proposed research questions occupies the central stage. What does that mean? So we need to understand that context. Where is that coming from? Where do you place your study? What is the focus of your study? Identify key players, that is the expert in the field, and refer to the most relevant and representative publications. Very important, because you need to understand that there is a lot of studies that were done out there. So you need to identify those ones that are related to what it is that you are doing. In short, try to paint your research question in broad brushes and at the same time bring out its significance. Very important to actually bring out why is your research important, to the body of knowledge. For example, we move on to statement of the problem. You should actually give a brief background about the problem in relation to the literature. So remember, you are reviewing literature. So you need to state the research problem. What is the problem? It is very important. Once you give a brief background of what it is that you are going to study, especially in terms of the problem, then you need to state the problem. Give a more detailed explanation about the purpose of the study than what you stated in the introduction. Remember, you are not repeating what you stated in the introduction here. You should actually every time relate to the literature. And this is particularly important if a problem is complex or multifaceted. So you should actually always relate to the literature. And describe the major issues or problems to be addressed by your research. What can your study do about the research problem? So we need to understand what is your study going to do. it is always important. I always advise my students to at least present statement of the problem in 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph, you are actually providing a brief background of the statement, and then you will then state the problem. Once you state the problem, you should then indicate what your study will do concerning the stated problem. Be sure to note how your proposed study builds on previous assumptions about the research problem. That is actually very important there. We need to know how you are building on previous assumptions, from previous studies. You are not reinventing the wheel. Take note of that. Moving to research questions, as I explained already, you should either choose research questions or objectives of the study. You should not do both. State the research questions in an attempt to answer, the problem or the research questions or objective, whichever it is. Choose one, either objectives or research questions, and not both. So you are not to write a heading that is comprising of the two. You need to make a choice already clearly before you submit your proposal. Place your research question in the context of either a current hot area or an older area that remains viable. You see, indicate the main research questions and sub-questions where applicable. It is always very important, even in terms of objective. Perhaps you have the main objectives and then these are the sub, or you have one main questions and maybe 3 sub questions that are building on the main questions. For example, indicate the main objectives where possible as well. So that is very important there. As the researcher, you make use of your own discretion as per the study that you are proposing. So we don't dictate on that. You choose yourself if you want to go for research questions or research objectives. Same applies to the rationale as explained earlier, or significance of the study. You should choose either rationale or significance, not both, and present the rationale of your proposed study and clearly indicate why it is worth doing. You should answer the so what. People might have that, why your study, why that particular study, why should people, why should anyone care? That is actually what you need to keep at the back of your mind. Because remember, you are justifying your study here. Why the study should be done. The specific purpose of the study, what it is, why is it important, why is it necessary. Describe how the anticipated result will impact future scholarly research, theory, practice, forms of interventions or policy making. For example, particularly the line ministry, if you are doing it through the Ministry of Education, how are the findings of your research? How will it inform policy makers? Perhaps you are looking at the policy, maybe you have identified some gaps in terms of policy, particularly maybe the ICT education policy. So you then need to make sure that you clearly indicate how this will then impact the future in terms of decision making. Perhaps you would want to advise the teachers, in terms of teaching practice. Okay, so that should really clearly come out. We are moving on to limitation of the study. You are expected to explain how you plan to go about conducting your research. Clearly identify the key resources you intend to use and explain how they will contribute to your analysis of the topic. What are the possible limitations of your study? Avoid using financial constraints and time as limitations. I always advise my students that remember you are actually required to carry out this project. So you cannot tell us that you will not be able to carry out this project because of financial constraints. It is actually part of the requirement for you to complete your degree. Okay? So you actually also you are ought to make time. You need to make time for your proposal. You need to make time for your project. So make a reference to either participants, settings, and or context. So it is important to perhaps relate to participants and say, for example, this study is limited to 2 participants or 2 teachers from a selected pre-primary school. That is just an example. Maybe the study is limited to 2 teachers from a secondary schools in the Commerce region, you see, or from 2 selected schools in Irongo region. That is just an example there. So you need to make a reference to participants, settings, and context. Moving on, we are going to look at the limitation of the study. Set the boundaries of your proposed research in order to provide a clear focus. Where appropriate, state not only what you will study, but what is excluded from the study. Very important to indicate the boundaries in terms of the participants, who will be included and who will be excluded. For example, 5 teachers from grade 10 to 12 will be included in this study, for example, all right? And then you can then indicate only maybe biology and life science teachers will be included. That is just an example. And then you can perhaps say physical science teachers and mathematics teachers will be excluded from the study, or perhaps you just want to focus on grade 10 teachers, then you will exclude maybe the grade 11 and 12. So that should clearly come out. So it depends on the study that you are proposing to do. Okay? Also very important in section 1 is what we term as definition of key concepts. If necessary, you should provide definitions of key concepts or terms. There you need to indicate how certain terms should be understood in your study. Depending on the number of terms, this can be presented in a table format. Very important. So once you provide a clear, So once you provide a clear definition of term, also very important, remember to provide the reference. You need to create source of information. Also indicate how it should be understood in your study. Remember, you are proposing, hey? Here you need to indicate how your reader should understand a certain maybe a word or term, whichever it is. Like for example, when you are saying assessment, if you are focusing on assessment, you then need to define assessment and how we should understand it in your study. Also provide reference for that definition, for that particular definition. We are now going to start with section 2. There is literature review. Literature review must be relevant to your topic. You need to at least make sure that you logically and clearly present your literature review. And at least you should make use of 8 separate cited materials. And then the review and synthesis of the prior studies related to the research problem under investigation should be clearly presented as such, and also focusing on those 8 separate cited materials. Remember, it is a proposal and you are given a limited number of pages. That is 12 pages. So it is very important that you summarize this section. Indicate theoretical or conceptual framework. When you need to make sure that you clearly state which one you will adopt or adapt in your study and how you will do so. You see, if your study will be underpinned by a theoretical framework, you need to indicate it. Which theory is that? There are various educational theories. If it's a conceptual framework that your study will develop, you also then need to indicate that you are developing it from which theory. Very important there as part of section 2. Okay, continuing with literature review. What do authors agree on? These are some of the very important questions that you need to consider. Who applies similar approaches to analyzing the research problem? What are the major areas of disagreement, controversies, debate? You need to pay attention to the verbs you use to describe what an author says, does, like for example, assert, demonstrate, argue. So you cannot just write Simon 2014, this and that and that. Perhaps you need to indicate, did the person demonstrate something? Did they argue? So that need to come out as you are reviewing the literature. How does your own work draw upon or depart from, synthesize or add a new perspective to what has been said in the literature? So your voice should come out here. You know, as we are reading your proposal, we should be able to hear your voice, because remember, you are conducting a review of the literature. So you are not copying and pasting what other authors said, but you are merely reviewing what it is that they have done. So that should clearly come out and we should hear your voice. Okay, that brings us to section 3, that is methodology. You know, research proposal is actually very short and brief. Some institutions you may be required to do it actually even in 6 pages, you see. So hence you are given 12 pages. That is actually so much. We are also thinking of adjusting the page numbers to 10, because we feel like students normally just submit things that are not really necessary. Because remember, when it comes to your research proposal, you are proposing what it is that you are going to do, how you are going to do it, and that idea that you have, how you are going to execute it. So moving to section 3, that is methodology, it will focus on research design, population where applicable, depending on the one that you are going to opt for, sample and sampling procedure, instruments, data collection procedure, data analysis, as well as ethical considerations. Those are very important subtopics in methodology section. We continue with methodology. So the decision as to why the research design and method use were chosen over other options, so that need to come out. You need to indicate why that particular method. You need to indicate clearly if it is qualitative or quantitative methods that you have opted for. And also you need to demonstrate your knowledge of alternative methods as well. Are you going to do a mixed method? That need to clearly come out. Okay, make use of the approach that is most appropriate and most valid way to address your research question. So we need to understand, if you are opting for qualitative, you need to justify as to why is qualitative applicable to your study. Why is qualitative and or quantitative applicable to answer the research questions? Remember, when you develop the research questions, those are the questions that you are attempting to answer as you are going to carry out your research. So there you need to decide on the method and that are appropriate for qualitative and or quantitative research. So that clearly need to come out. You are not going to address both unless you want to do a mixed method. Then you can then justify accordingly. Okay, moving on. We are still busy with the research methodology. If you are opting for qualitative research, you need to understand that this is multi-method that is in focus, involving an interpretive or neutralistic approach. So the understanding is underlying reasons, opinions and motivation. So there is always a need to motivate why opting for that particular qualitative method, and also in terms of qualitative research, I always encourage students to clearly indicate if you are going the route of a single case study, or are you going to do a multiple case study, or is it going to be ethnographic study. So that need to clearly come out from the onset. It need to be stated clearly. And also in terms of qualitative analysis, your method section needs to be more elaborate. You need to elaborate on the methods. Also, in terms of data collection process in qualitative research, this has far greater impact on the result as compared to the quantitative research, you see. So it's in-depth understanding of your, the participants' context, the settings, their perspectives. So you get deeper into it. So it is very important that this clearly comes out. Okay, moving on. If you are opting for quantitative study, then it is very important that you understand that the method section typically consists of different sections. The design, particularly, is it a questionnaire study or laboratory experiment? What kind of design do you choose? Are you doing a quasi-experimental? So that need to clearly come out as well. Subject or participant, these are now your research participants who will take part in your study. What kind of sampling procedure do you use in terms of population? Because here normally they talk about population as well. In terms of instruments, what kind of measuring instruments or questionnaires do you use? Why do you choose them? Are they valid? Are they reliable? So those justification thereof need to be clearly stated as well. In terms of the procedure, how do you plan to carry out your study? What activities are involved? How long does it take? So these are the questions that should be at the back of your mind. You need to understand that in your tutorial letter, your assignment is clearly outlined, and there is a clear guidelines as well that is provided for you in terms of the research proposal. Then you need to specifically number specific section or subsections under specific sections of the research proposal. Also very important for the proposal is that you are required to compile a reference list. This is a list of all the resources or the cited materials. You need to make use of APA referencing style for in-text citations and reference list. Also very important, you need to list only sources that you actually used or cited in your proposal, and please avoid plagiarism and credit all sources of information. I have noticed that in many cases our students normally just copy previous studies. That is not going to happen. You are actually encouraged to write your own proposal. Do not copy previous studies. Do not copy proposals that were done previously by IOL students, because we are going to run it through the plagiarism detection software, and we can actually pick up that you have copied that proposal, and then you can forfeit your marks. You will maybe be asked to redo it, and if there are no changes, so much can happen, because we are saying plagiarism is an academic dishonest. So we actually need to make sure that we write our own proposal and that we credit all sources of information. That is very important. So once you are done, you then generate also the reference list. It is also very important. You need to understand how to use Microsoft Word, because it can really make your work easier. You can actually already enter the reference, the cited, the sources, the materials that you are using. And at the end, once you are done compiling your research proposal, you can actually generate what we call the reference your references. Then you can have a reference list that is generated by the system, by your computer. You see, that same applies. You just format your references accordingly. Same applies to the table of content. So that is actually very important. And now we can quickly look at common mistakes in proposal writing. You know, failure to provide the proper context to frame the research question, failure to delimit the boundary conditions of your research. These are some of the mistakes that most our students happen to do. Failure to cite landmark studies. You are just copying and pasting. Very important. Also, failure to accurately present the theoretical and empirical contributions by other researchers. Failure to stay focused on the research questions. Focus on your research questions. If there are 3, only on those ones, because the research proposal should be actually clearly presented such that you avoid going around and about. You know, failure to develop a coherent and persuasive argument for the proposed research. So these are some of the common mistakes. Too much detail on minor issues but not enough detail on major issues. Too much rambling, going all over the map without clear sense. So this is what I've already addressed. And too many citations, lapses, and incorrect references. As I say, please just select the 8 for your proposal for now. And also too long or too short. Failing to follow the APA referencing style and sloping writing. So please make use of academic writing for your proposal. These are very important links for you. You can actually just go through them and you can get more information on how to write a research or develop a research proposal. And having said that, I would like to thank you for your time and for listening to this presentation. You can go through it over and over again just to make sure that you understand what is required of you when compiling your research proposal. Please feel free to contact me on my email address. You can drop me an email at etunangifikwa@gmail.com and also text me on 085 266 3698, and the best time to contact me is actually between 8:30 and 4:30. Then I will actually attend to your queries accordingly. Thank you.